You never want to be the guy after the guy. How's Quinshon Judkins going to handle that? We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. How much pressure, or added pressure really, is Quinshon Judkins under being Nick Chubb's successor? We'll talk about it. A wide receiver trade that the Browns should consider before training camp, and 5 things I'll be watching at mandatory minicamp this week. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends too. And it's totally free to you. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. And, of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comments section. This is your team. So be part of the conversation every single day. Following in Nick Chubb's footsteps was never going to be easy for some unlucky running back. And that just so happens to be Quinshon Judkins, and to a degree, Dylan Sampson, who's going to be part of this tandem that they've created with the 2 guys they drafted. But more so, obviously, Quinshon Judkins, because he's going to be your lead guy. He's going to be your bell cow. He's going to be your lead back. And so there is, I think, a little bit of added expectations when you're following in the footsteps of the guy. Nick Chubb is the guy, and you never want to be the guy following the guy. And unfortunately, that's the situation Quinshon Judkins finds himself in. Not that I think he is adding any extra pressure in his own mind in that regard. Like, I think he's coming in and just trying to be Quinshon Judkins. And I think that's the only thing he can be. But I think, like, from an outside perspective, I'm curious how you maybe think or feel about the idea that there's this added pressure on Quinshon because he's following in the footsteps of one of the best running backs in franchise history, one of the best players in franchise history, a fan favorite, maybe like the epitome of what it means to be a Cleveland Brown since the team returned in 1999. Like, we know how much Nick Chubb was adored. I talked about it on yesterday's episode. And so it's a hard person to sort of be coming in on the heels of. That said, it would be different if Quinshon Judkins was a quarterback, or if we were talking about the quarterback position here. The difference is with the quarterback position, everybody knows how important that role is. Everybody knows how important that responsibility is to winning. And quarterbacks in this league are always the most polarizing figures in the game, hands down, no questions asked. And so understanding that about the makeup of a locker room, the makeup of a roster, the makeup of a team, I think if this was a quarterback departure that fans loved that we were talking about, and the guy coming in, you know that there would definitely be pressure with that. Like, it's the Patriots Tom Brady situation, right? Like, they haven't been able to. They think they now have their next guy, that's the franchise guy in Drake May, but nobody wanted to be Mac Jones, who was the guy coming in after Tom Brady is like the young up and comer that they were hoping was going to turn into. Nobody wanted to be that guy because he's the greatest of all time, and those are big shoes to fill. And I don't want to. I'm not going to sit here and say that like he has to fill those shoes, but I do think if it was the quarterback position we were talking about, there would be a lot of added pressure. I think, because it's the running back spot and the running back role, and fans understand at this point, people who watch the sport for as fans or for a living, they understand obviously at this point that you can win Super Bowls, you can win championships with running backs who aren't Nick Chubb and be just fine. And Nick Chubb is sort of proof of that, right? Like, how dominant was he for the first 6 to 7 years of his career? Where he was the top 5, if not the best back in football. And you had, and where did it get the Browns? It got the Browns 2 playoff appearances, one that he wasn't even really there for, and 1 playoff win. And that's not a knock on Nick Chubb. It just speaks to the fact that you have to have a team and still have a quarterback on a championship caliber team to get over those humps and actually make the deep playoff runs. And so I think that people understand that as good as Nick Chubb was, you don't have to be Nick Chubb to have success with this franchise or with this Browns team. You don't have to be Nick Chubb for this team to go win a championship. And if Quinshon Judkins is a great back and the Browns are in a couple years here, like in line to win the Super Bowl or like making deep playoff runs, there's no one's going to be sitting there, splitting hairs on whether or not Quinshon Judkins is Nick Chubb or not. It's just not going to happen. So I think that's part one of this. I think part two of this too is that it's just totally unfair to compare Quinshon to Chubb or Dylan Sampson and Nick Chubb, and make any one of those guys have to fit into a box and be that guy. It's in terms both on the field, but also off the field. Like nobody should expect that any of these young players at this juncture are going to capture the fan base or captivate the fan base the same way that Nick Chubb did. He meant something to this city that is almost unreplicable. And it would be totally unfair for anybody to sit there and say, well, Quinshon's got to kind of like follow in those footsteps. I'm not going to expect Quinshon Judkins to do that. I'm going to hope that Quinshon is really, really good. In fact, I think he's going to be really, really good and go out and prove why he can be one of the best backs in football in his own right and put up some big numbers and do some impressive things while Dylan Sampson sort of works in as that extra third down guy and spells him a little bit and gives him, you can see some different looks with them, and they both sort of each prolong each other's careers the same way Chubb and Hunt did with their duo early on in this run that the Browns were on. So I think that like he can just come in with a clear head, be himself, and nobody should be holding him to that standard because again, it's impossible to be Nick Chubb and mean to this fan base what Nick Chubb meant to this fan base. And I think it would be very irresponsible and inappropriate to try to bestow that on anybody and say, this is what you got to get to. I just don't think that that's fair. I don't think that's how people are going to treat Quinshon Judkins. From my end, the way things kind of are going right now, it feels like everyone's just excited about the opportunity to have this back who is, supposed to be electric and physical and brings a lot to the table out of a great running back class this past year in the draft. And they're giving him a chance to sort of prove it himself and do what he was going to do and be his own person. That's important. Like, I think that stuff does matter. I also wonder if like maybe the last 2 years of Nick Chubb, where he hasn't really been on the field as much as people wanted, have paved the way to have people keep an open mind about Quinshon and where he, like, I think people also understood, even though it's tough to see Nick Chubb go, I think there is an understanding that, he maybe wasn't the same player and that the physical grind of this sport and the very unfortunate knee injury impacted impacted the end of his time with this franchise, because he would still be here without questions asked if, he hadn't suffered that knee injury in the first place that sort of set back his career, and then followed it up with the foot injury last year that sort of ended his season and basically, didn't allow the Browns to see enough of a sample size to think like, well, we believe that guy's still there. So that's why we're at where we're at. Now, the worst thing that can happen is that Chubb goes out and performs the way he used to. He's averaging 5 yards per carry. He's going to be in a split backfield with Joe Mixon in Houston. So the worst thing that can happen is he goes out, dominates the same way he used to, does get back to that guy. And Quinshon's just like good, not great. I don't think that's going to happen because I think Quinshon's going to be really, really good to great. I think he's going to be a fantastic piece of this offense. I think he's going to be so important to this offense that it's going to be undeniable and impossible for him to not be great in it. But if Chubb gets back to the form, then people I think will be looking back and being like, we can't believe we let this guy walk. But I also think people will keep that in perspective and say we should have brought Nick Chubb back, rather than saying it's putting that on Quinshon that he's not Nick Chubb. I think they'll blame the organization before they blame Quinshon, and I think that's another reason why there's not as much pressure in this conversation and in this the position, because no one should be asked to replicate what Nick Chubb brought to the table. And just because, like I said, I think people would blame the organization before they blame Quinshon Judkins if Nick Chubb goes on to have success somewhere else and it's not here. Speaking of offensive weapons, we know wide receiver is still a need for this team, and I have an intriguing under-the-radar wide receiver trade target that actually has a connection to Nick Chubb. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track of the things you're spending on. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Take advantage of their all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever because you can track your shared or personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without stress. And I can tell you that finances in my household are one of the more stressful things. We're planning vacations for the summer, trying to figure out how much money we have for different things that we want to do. And having Monarch Money by our side to help us give us a better indicator and a clear picture of where we're at financially has made that process so much smoother than ever before. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, so we know that wide receiver is a massive, massive need for the Cleveland Browns right now. Very shorthanded, not a lot of proven commodities in their wide receiver room at this juncture. And at some point, I've been saying it, I think they are due to make an addition. Now, when that comes, if it's before training camp, if it's after training camp, or not after training camp, it could be after training camp because it could be when like roster cut down day comes. But we know last year, for example, during training camp, the Browns were linked to the Brandon Ayuk trade. There was tons of smoke that they were going to trade Amari Cooper and some sort of pick for Brandon Ayuk and bring this new, young, spry wide receiver group together with Jerry Jeudy and Brandon Ayuk was kind of the goal there. Now, in this instance, they have Jerry Jeudy. He's your one proven commodity. He's the guy that you can trust. Diontae Johnson's kind of a proven commodity, but a head case that you don't really know if he's going to buy in. And then you have Cedric Tillman, who's kind of unproven of this group. And what's interesting is like the slot position in particular is maybe the biggest hole at that spot, at that position specifically, that the Browns have to fill. Because Diontae Johnson, I've kind of assumed could take that role, but we haven't seen him there yet. That is going to be on my list of things I'll be watching at minicamp this week, so stay tuned for that. But he's also been a more of an outside guy throughout his career. So how he fits into this picture is going to be interesting. And otherwise, it's been a lot of Jamari Thrash, who has problems catching the ball at times, and DeAndre Carter, who's more of a return specialist at this point in his career, who have taken on those reps in the slot, at least what we saw during OTAs. So those are some of the things that, I think they still have to sort out. They have to figure out what's going to happen with that slot position. It might mean a lot more Harold Fannin Jr. as currently constructed. But if you're looking for a wide receiver that maybe makes some sense, that you're taking a little bit of a flyer on, taking a little bit of a chance on, can I present you with one, John Metchie from the Texans, who is a second-round pick from just a couple years ago, hasn't really had a chance to break out in a big way because of the nature of the Texans roster. They've been pretty top-heavy at wide receiver. They had Stephon Diggs there last year. He's gone. But you still had Nico Collins. You still had Tank Dell. Tank Dell this year coming back from an injury. But you saw the Texans trade for Christian Kirk this offseason. You saw them add through the draft Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. They prioritized that position in a massive, massive way this offseason. And so as things stand right now, John Metchie is basically he's on the outside looking in. Like I think he is in an open competition right now to even make this roster for the Texans, which maybe presents an opportunity to, sign him in as a free agent later. But sometimes teams don't want to take their chances with that. We know the Browns have been aggressive at times, especially when it comes to their quarterbacks at the end of training camp, and they try to trade one instead of just outright, cut one and let somebody sign him. They try to get something of value back. And so I think the Texans are going to do the same thing. I think the Texans are probably going to shop him. I think he'd be available. And Metchie fits what the Browns are looking for in terms of that slot spot, because last year, 467 snaps he took, 254 of them, more than half his snaps, came from the slot position. And there still is a lot for him to prove. Like, I'm not saying that this is a perfect solve. It doesn't answer the question with somebody that's like a proven commodity, and I get why that might turn some people off. But here's the thing. The Browns are in a situation right now where they need to add players with upside and potential and guys that they think can provide them with something and that they can hope that they think they can kind of develop and take some chances. They have to take some chances right now because of the finances of things, because they don't have the money to spend. And so, yes, trading for John Metchie would be taking a little bit of a chance on a guy that hasn't proven quite yet that he's going to be a reliable weapon in the NFL. But I think you saw some flashes last year. He caught 24 passes, 254 yards, and a touchdown last year. It was progress on his previous season, his sophomore season, which obviously he missed his rookie season battling leukemia, which is, just was a terrible way and a sad way for him to start his career. And he's just kind of hasn't found his footing since. But there's so much upside there because Metchie coming out was considered one of the better prospects in that wide receiver class in 2022 out of Alabama. And, put up some big numbers at Bama. There was high hopes for him. He was a second-round pick for a reason. And so I think there is still some room to see him grow and reach a level that he hasn't necessarily reached yet. And the Browns can sort of bank on that in this situation and add him to this room and give yourself a slot option that's young and has maybe shown something, but that you still, aren't 100% sure. Like, it's a second-round talent that you're banking on realizing his full potential and growing into the role that you would put him in. I don't have a problem with that. I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think it would cost you a ton either. Like, because Metchie hasn't put up the big numbers, it's not like you're going to have to trade a second-round pick because he was a second-round pick. You're probably talking about like a fifth-round pick, maybe a fourth-round pick. I don't even think it'd go that high, though. I think a fifth-round pick probably gets it done. And so that gives the Browns now another option, and it gives the Browns another guy that they can hopefully see develop into something for them in that spot. And I get it. It. Like I said, it's not a perfect solve. I get that. I know it's not a proven commodity that you would hope for in that role next to Jerry Jeudy, because we're talking about a room in general that's very inexperienced, and Metchie would only add to that inexperience in the grand scheme of things. But more competition, the better is one argument to make here. And I do think like part of the reason we're concerned about the inexperience of this group is because like the guys you're talking about aren't high end picks or guys that, were valued at a high level coming into the NFL. You're talking about Cedric Tillman, who's a third-round pick, who I do think has a chance to turn into something. I'm excited about the idea of Cedric Tillman blossoming in this role that he's going to find himself in. I also think that I like, and then, but after Diontae Johnson, though, it's like sort of a bunch of unproven commodities, late round draft picks from Andrew Berry or undrafted free agents that he signed over the years that haven't quite realized their full potential, like come into their own. And so those are the question marks that this team has. And so Metchie sort of fits the billing of guy who's unproven, yes, but also, like I said, second round talent that we're talking about, who in the right situation, I think could thrive. And that could be here. So it's just an idea because I think the cost would not be too exuberant for Cleveland if they were to swing a deal. And because I think he's probably on the outside looking into Houston, given how they addressed the wide receiver position this offseason, it just kind of came to mind. It struck me as an idea that the Browns could pursue as they look to add to the wide receiver room. And the key thing to remember is like they're probably looking more than anything for a slot receiver, not necessarily an outside guy. And Metchie fits that based off of his snaps from the year before, from this past year, where he played a lot in the slot. And so I think that would be a fit in that regard. If the Browns are looking to add, which I think they are, it's something to keep in mind. It helps that Barry has at least swung some deals with Nick Caserio before. Now, granted, you can call it the worst trade in NFL history because they traded for Deshaun Watson, and that's fine. But it's not like this is the first time that these two sides have come together and consummated a deal. The relationship is there. I'm sure there will be at least phone calls made, especially because the Texans right now are figuring to have like an embarrassment of riches at that position in particular throughout this training camps, throughout the upcoming training camp, throughout that the preseason as they get ready for the regular season. I'm sure other teams will be calling as well. And it might be a thought, or it might be wise for the Browns to get in on that and try to see if they can swing a deal for a John Metchie, who I think would be a good fit here and have some room to grow and develop into something as in a group. Listen, the reps will be there. Like, he'll get the snaps, he'll get the opportunities. And I think that's the best thing you can ask for a team right now that's just kind of like trying to piece this thing together the best they can with a dicey financial situation and not a lot of options at their disposal. So just a thought. Let me know what you think about it. You can hit me up at @SpenceD_, in the comments section as well. If you think John Metchie would be a cool or an interesting idea for the Browns to pursue, Maybe you hate it. You can let me know that as well. I'm sure many of you will, because I tend to get plenty of people against my opinions in the comment section on YouTube as well, which is totally fine. I appreciate the interactions regardless. Now, of course, the quarterback competition is going to lead the way at minicamp this week, but I have 5 things that I'll be watching closely at mandatory minicamp for the Browns. Keep it locked. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, mandatory minicamp getting rolling on Tuesday, today, the day of this podcast dropping. And of course, the quarterback competition is going to be the focal point. We know that. What does the rep share look like with the real ones present? Because that's, what's happening here. Myles Garrett is going to be here now. That's another body on the defensive line who's going to be bearing down on you and chasing after you. How do the quarterbacks look in those scenarios? But you're going to have like your true ones. You're going to have your true twos. Like this is the whole team coming together now. And so you'll get the real look at how this thing is kind of set up at this juncture. And listen, get ready for another week of Kevin Stefanski telling everybody that the reps don't matter, the rep counts don't matter, the order doesn't matter, all those things. But it's plain and simple. Like by the end of this week, they're going to have some idea of, okay, this is what our depth chart at quarterback is going to look like heading into training camp, because they have to have an idea of that, because once you get to training camp, yes, the competition is still quote unquote ongoing, if you will. But at the same time, you have to have some sort of idea of what this room is like, who's the leader in the clubhouse, how the depth chart is taking shape, because you are now preparing for the season once you get to that point of the year. And you have to be preparing. If you think one guy is going to be your starter, he's got to get the most reps so he can just be on the same page, be, in sync with everybody. And so that's kind of the key element here. So by the end of this week, they'll have a better picture of what that room is going to look like when training camp rolls around. And so I will obviously be watching that closely and seeing just like how the rotation is handled, who's taking 11 on 11 reps, who's with the ones, because we have the true visions of what the ones and the twos and the threes and the fours are going to look like before training camp. And all those different things will sort of be painted for us or clear for us as we, get ready for training camp. So that's the first thing. Obviously, I'll be watching. Everyone's going to be watching the quarterbacks. We know that. The second thing, staying on the offensive side, and a lot of these are on the offensive side. Diontae Johnson, what will his role look like? How will he be deployed? How is he getting worked into the rotation? Will he be in the slot? Will they surprise some people and put him there? Will he be an outside guy, spelling Cedric Tillman? I'm curious about all these different things. I'm curious to see how they utilize him. He obviously wasn't at OTAs the last couple of weeks, for better or for worse. And so this will be our first chance to really see their plans in the offense for Diontae Johnson and what they want him to sort of do if he's going to make this team. So capturing that, getting a sense of what they're sort of thinking there, I think will be valuable. I think will be interesting. And that's number 2 on the list of things that I'm going to be watching this week. Number 3 on the list of 5 things, staying on the offense yet again. This is, I guess, a little bit of both, but Dawand Jones versus Myles Garrett. To me, Dawand Jones has been outside of the quarterbacks, the biggest story from OTAs. Like just how he looks, how he's moving, his health, the fact that he lost some weight. He looks like he is ready to compete at a high level, potentially solidify that starting left tackle spot for a while, for years to come, hopefully, is what the Browns are thinking. And if he's going to do that, going against Myles Garrett is not a bad way to prepare and get yourself ready. And so I understand, like, the intensity isn't full because you don't have full pads on. It's still dialed back a little bit when you're just wearing a helmet. But, simulating Myles when he uses his get off to try to get around you. And how quickly can you get out and get hands on him and try to block him? How quickly can you take that drop step to get there and get in position to be able to block him? Those are the things you're looking for Dawand Jones. He's going to be tested. I'm sure there'll be some reps where he gets absolutely beat because Myles is that good of a player. He's a Hall of Fame player you're trying to block here. No one expects Dawand Jones to be a Hall of Fame player instantly or at this juncture of his career or anything like that. So you got to give him some time and some grace. But I'm going to be fascinated to see, as good as he's looked, what he looks like against Myles Garrett at this juncture. And I'm not going to hold it crazily against him because I'm interested to see what it looks like in training camp when the full pads come on. But yes, that is a one-on-one matchup that's going to be juicy and certainly worth paying attention to for those of us who are going to be out there. Next, one more on the offensive side, the David Njoku, Harold Fannin usage and deployment. How are they utilizing these guys? Because right now, Harold Fannin Jr. doesn't necessarily look like he's ready to be like that inline blocker. He's got to put some more muscle on, I would say. And especially with the Browns not having a true reliable slot receiver, as we talked about, does he just be like, is he just more of your pass catcher? Is he going to be sort of split out more? How much 12 personnel are the Browns going to sort of show this week at minicamp with David Njoku and Harold Fannin Jr. on the field at the same time? I think that stuff is worth monitoring and worth checking out. And yeah, like how they use both of them is going to be interesting. Obviously, I think a lot more of the blocking responsibilities are going to be on Njoku. But he also is trying to get back to putting up numbers as a pass catcher, as he was a Pro Bowler just in 2023 with Flacco's help. And so he wasn't healthy last year. So I do think it's a big season for him coming up in general. And so how they deploy both those guys will be very, very interesting. I'm sure Njoku's role doesn't change all that much, but Fannin in particular is going to be interesting. And then how much they're on the field together is going to be interesting. So again, you're not going to get the whole picture in 3 days of minicamp, but just to get a sense of like how they're sort of utilizing those guys, I think will be something to keep an eye on. And then last thing, number 5 on my list of 5 things I'll be paying close attention to at mandatory minicamp this week: defensive line rotations and groupings. Miles, we know, is a projected starter. No questions asked. Mason Graham should be a starter at one of the interior defensive line positions. That's pretty clear and obvious as well. I would be surprised if he's not. You don't take a player number 5 overall that you don't think is going to be a day one starter. So I think we're all banking on that. But then we know about the defensive end spot opposite of Myles Garrett. Open up for grabs: Isaiah McGuire, Alex Wright, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. How are those guys sort of being rotated there? Who's maybe first up, who's second up, who's third up, that type of thing. And then also even a slot in from that where you have, I think the assumption has kind of been it's going to be Mike Hall Jr. who takes that other interior spot. But they did sign Malik Collins this offseason, who had one of the best pass rush or pressure rates from the interior this season. As an interior guy, like he is a player that certainly still has a lot left in the tank. I think the defensive line might actually be better this year than last year, and which this is kind of an early take that I have on this team. Even though you don't have your Zadarius Smith there this year, I think there's some truth in this. And so I'm fascinated to see like what those other 2 spots that they're going to have to sort of sort through look like, and how Jim Schwartz is planning on rotating guys and whatnot. And so that'll be a fun one to sort of keep an eye on as well. That's it. Another episode Down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. And there's more to come this week, including my observations from these 3 days of practice, getting you ready for the, talking about Diontae Johnson and his role. I have some fun stuff planned down the pike here as well, coming up in the weeks ahead as we get to the dog days of summer, if you will. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See ya.